Hey, I'm Gopar, and this is the Real Estate and Org Mode Table Formulas Talk. Not very creative, but it is what it is. Now, I just want to say that everything I talk about here is in the Org Mode, in the Emacs manual. So I posted a link to the web version, but it should be inside of Emacs as well. Now, before I start, I want to showcase the end goal. That way, you know if you guys want to actually see the talk or not. So I always think that's pretty cool to see what you're actually going to build before you start building it. Alright, so let me start off with the goal, with the end goal. And here we're going to have a simple table formula, and we have some constants, some values inside the table, and some other stuff that we will get to. But for now, I don't want to spoil too much, but I just want to give you a demo of how it actually works. So we have a few values. So let me first go over the constants. So we have PMI, which stands for private mortgage insurance. So it's insurance that you'll have to pay depending on how much money you put into the deal. The property tax, which is explanatory, the tax that you owe for owning the property, and then home insurance and the interest rate at the loan that you get. So here we have a few columns. The first one is called house, which I usually just put a description of the house with the link of the posting, the price of the house, the percentage down payment. This I play around with to see how much the deal will be structured. The down payment, which is calculated from the previous two columns, the monthly mortgage, which is calculated as well, and then the tenant income, which is what I suppose would be an example of the tenant income that I can potentially make off the property, the 1% rule and the ROI. I'll quickly go over the last two columns. So first is the 1% rule. The 1% rule is essentially a rule, in quotes, that says that if a property matches this specific formula, it is a good deal to look into. So for example, the first two pass, and the last one does not pass. So the last one, at a quick glance, we can just ignore it and say, hey, that's not going to fly. We'll just ignore it. I won't go too much into details. That's just a brief summary. So now the ROI is the return on investment. So it says how much of a return am I getting on the amount that I invested. So let's say you put in $12,000, and at the end of the year you cash flow $6,000. So if you calculate the ROI off of that, you get a 50% return on investment. So in 2 years you'll make your money back, which is pretty good. And then all the rest of the years you'll just slowly be reaping in all the excess cash flow. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. But so let me demo it real quick. So for example, I'm going to change the down payment, but I want you to pay attention to this column and the monthly mortgage column. So right here is 25,000, and here is around 1,200, a little under 1,300. So what happens if I say, you know what, I'm going to change the down payment to 5% instead, because I don't want to put 10. So let's just put say 5, and then I tab out of here, and voila. You see, it updated to half of 25,000, so now it's 12,000, and this went up over actually 1,300. And then this hasn't changed at all, and the ROI is there. But yeah, so one thing that I should mention is everything that I'm putting here is just example numbers, should not be taken into literal real estate advice. So just want to put that out there. These are just examples to show you how you can potentially make it on your own, do the formulas on your own. Alright, so another cool thing that I did was if there is no tenant income and I tab, it says enter tenant income. So if I don't put anything, it will automatically tell me, hey, I can't calculate without the tenant income. I can also do this right here, say the same thing, enter tenant income, but I just didn't put it for whatever reason. But after this video, you should be easily able to put it, yeah, without much struggle. Alright, so if that's something you're interested in, then keep watching. So let's go over the basics first. So how do we create a table? Well, we can do meta-x or table create, and if we run that, it will prompt us in a mini buffer. It says table size columns times row. Usually it's rows times columns, but it is what it is. So let's just leave the default of 5 times 2, and voila, we get this. Beautiful, awesome. So the other way is using the magical Control-C in org mode, which basically is context aware and does the right thing like almost 100% of the time, which is pretty amazing. Alright, so let's just say I write a pipe, some words, and then another pipe, Gopar, and then another pipe. So let's just say we're trying to write it out via text, because in org mode everything is text, there's nothing fancy about it. So if I do Control-C, org mode should automatically be context aware that this area is a table. So Control-C, boom. So if I press enter, another column. If I press tab, it should automatically move me. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So that's how you get started into the column. So, but I'm assuming most of the people here already know that. This is just a primary, a basic review. So let's dive right into our first formula. So I copied some values over here just to save time and the columns. So let's go ahead and say that we have a single family house and the price is 100,000. And let's say that I want the price, the down payment that I want to put is 10%. All right. So, all right, 10%. Now if I tab or go to the next column, nothing happens. Why is that? Well, it's because, you probably guessed it, we haven't written or tied any table formulas. So we're saying, all right, enough talk. How do we do that? Well, the answer is very simple. We do a pound sign, if I can find it, pound sign plus, and then we do TBL for table, and then FM for formula. So table formula and a column. So this, you're already halfway to writing your first table formula. So let's say we want to automatically, let's just for exercise, we want to put the down payment, just put some type of value in there just to make sure that it's working. So the way org mode refers to columns is we start with the $sign, and then we put the number that the column is, and the indexes start with 1, not a 0, as for most of us watching our programmers, we probably used to starting with 0, but it starts with 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So down payment is the 5th column. We say 5, and then we say equal to, let's say, Gopar. And then we do Control C to evaluate it, and the table is automatically updated. Look at that. So when you do just this, $5, it updates every single column. There is a way to specify that this cell only and this cell only, but this is out of scope, and it's not that hard. It's just not in this video. I commend you, or actually I recommend that you go check out the manual for that. All right, so let's say we want to do some basic arithmetic. We want to do some list values instead of just putting in text. So how do we do that? Well, we have to quote the expression that we want to put in. So for example, if we want to add, we'll do 20 plus 20. And if we do Control C to evaluate it, it should update every single column, the entire column, the 5th column, I mean, and ta-da, it does. Cool. So now let's say we want to do a little bit more advanced. Let's say we want to add the previous column to this column. So how do we refer to this one? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the 4th column. So we would just simply do $4, and this should automatically be referring to this column. So we'll do 10 plus 20. It's going to be 30 over here. And let's do Control C. Ooh, error. What happened? Oh my God. Oh my God. Well, this seems scary, but no worries. This is where debugging comes in pretty handy, which is actually our next section, as you can see. So what happens if we go into the debugging section? What is the first step? Well, the first step is to enable formula debugger. So if you do Control C, open squiggly bracket, it will turn on a minor mode that whenever you evaluate a table formula, the debugger will be enabled, will automatically kick in. And if you want to disable the debugger, you just run the command again and it will turn off. So let's go ahead and run it. Control C, open squiggly brackets, and as you can see in the menu buffer, it says formula debugging has been turned on. Awesome. So if we go back to our table and we try to run this and see what's going on, we see, first off, before we look at the buffer that just opened, look at the mini buffer. It says debugging formula, continue to next. So if you have multiple or a series of formulas, it will say, hey, do you want to debug this one or the next one? So this is just saying, hey, do you want to go into the next formula? And since there's no next formula, debugger will just exit out and leave you with the other buffer to see. For now, we'll just click no. Right now, it doesn't matter if you click yes or no because there's only one formula, but we'll just click no. And let's go ahead and pay attention to the new buffer. Well, over here it might seem a little confusing, but don't worry, we're just going to ignore most of this. But the first thing that we're going to pay attention is to the original. So it says, okay, this is the original. So we have a quote expression, which is just trying to add the 4th column. And if we go over here, once everything is finalized, it says, hey, we're trying to add this 10 but it's actually a string 10 and added to 20. So of course that's going to be an error. So now we know what the error is. So you're saying, all right, cool, awesome. Now how do we transform that string into a number? Well, org mode formulas have these flags that you can use. And essentially a flag looks like this. It's a semicolon followed by some letter or some identifier that will let org mode know that, hey, this should be turned into a number, or this should be turned into whatever. So there's different ones for L for literal and for a bunch of, I think there's even I for integer. So it depends what you want. So for now, we're just going to put number because it's a real number. And if we do this and the debugger is still on, remember, because it automatically stays on until we turn it off, if we reevaluate the formula, we should be able to see it. But first, before I do that, let's check step 2. I'll now rerun formulas with Control C asterisk and table, which it calls org table recalculate. So to do this, you actually have to be inside the table. Otherwise, org mode will try to do some other stuff because it is context aware. So depending on the context, it might do something else. So if we do Control C and then the asterisk, and then as you can see, the debugger is kicked in, says, do you want to continue to next? Let's press yes, and it has been applied. So as you can see, it only updated one column. One row. And the thing is, when you run this, the recalculate, it will only run for the current row that you're in. If you want to run for the entire table, you're gonna do Control U, Control C asterisk. Before I do that, let me turn off the debugger since we no longer are in need of it. So Control C, open squiggly bracket, and debugging has been turned on. So now let me do Control U, Control C asterisk, and as you can see, the other row is also calculated, updated as well. Beautiful. So as I mentioned, feel free to browse the documentation for more flags, because each flag has its own special meaning and will do different things, which is pretty cool. So now, all right, cool, we're done with debugging and we fixed it. So there, now we know how to create formulas and how to debug them whenever they break, which is awesome. All right, but remember how I said that you can only debug, whenever you run recalculate, it will only run the first formula. Well, let's say you want to have multiple formulas, which this is completely valid, except the bad thing is that you have to do Control C, Control C, Control C on each one, because Control U, Control C asterisk won't recalculate everything. It won't, sadly, it doesn't do it. There is a way that you can do it, which is hacking together some eLisp. You can probably find it, or you can probably make it yourself if you look around, but that's out of scope for this. So now, we can write all the formulas we want in one single line. So there's a way to distinguish when one ends and one begins, and that is the double colon. So right there, and a new formula will begin. So for example, let's say for the 7th column, we say Gopar. And if I do Control C, it'll run every single thing. So there, Gopar. Ta-da! There, awesome. But this is going to get very annoying if you're simply trying to edit formulas like this, right? So that's where the nicer editing section comes in. So yes, just like as mentioned, table calls only the first formula. So what's the step onto this nicer editing section? Try out Control C, comma, or org edit special. So let's go back to the table formula and call it. Oh my god, look at that. A new buffer just for editing. And each formula is in its own line to make it easier, which is beautiful. So let's just say I want to do another calculation. Let's do 8 times 8, which should be 64, and we have no need of putting this flag because the flag only affects it on the input coming in. I should have mentioned that earlier. Only input coming in. There is ways to affect the output, which we'll also cover in this talk but later on. But for now, you can either leave the end flag or leave it out. It will still work fine. So let's just leave it out for now, and let's just do Control C to make sure that everything is working. Control C, 64. Beautiful. So there you have it. You can have multiple formulas just stacked up into one line, and whenever you need to edit it, just go into that line and Control C, comma, and ta-da. you have this ready, good to go, and for editing. Oh, and if you want to exit out, also just do Control C, comma again, and you're back. I did not mention that. Sweet. So now we know how to have better editing experience. Sweet. So now comes the formatting section, which I talked about. So what's the first step? Well, for formatting, org mode uses the printf function from C. So those who are familiar with C, you'll feel right at home because the way you format it is exactly the same way. So for example, this will print off a floating number with 2 decimal points. As you can see here, this is how you will use it. It will be after the semicolon and it will be %.2f. So let's go ahead and test that out actually. Let's go ahead and to our latest function. To our latest formula. Let's go ahead to the nicer buffer and let's do, control, let's enter the semicolon and then let's put the %, we do 2f, actually let's make it 5 just to differentiate from the formula. And let's see, let's run it and ta-da. So yeah, as you can see, 5 decimal points, and if we want 0 decimal points, we can also just put 0.0 and ta-da, just like that. We can also just leave it as is how it was before, because before we didn't even actually need it. But yeah, just an example. And just a reminder, there are plenty more ways of formatting. Just look at the documentation. There will be more. Basically every single thing that you need, just use the documentation as reference. Cool. So now we know how to debug, how to write formulas, and how to get a better, nicer editing buffer for the formula, so we don't have to do it all in a single line. So what about conditional prompts, like I was showing in the first table in the end goal? Well, that's actually pretty simple because we already know how to do this. Yes, if you think about it for a second, if we are able to pull list as expressions, then we are able to basically do it already. And here's an example. We're saying if the second column is empty, is 0, so actually this should be with the end flag, because we will transform empty values as 0, and that's how org mode will read those. It's saying if the second flag is 0, then I want you to put enter the values. And if it's not empty, we're going to put values entered. We're going to recognize. So let's go ahead and actually do this. So let's grab this and let's type it in. So let's go ahead, enter the values because it doesn't have any. So let's go ahead and say hello EmacsConf. And let's go ahead and run it again, and since there are values, it's going to overwrite what's here and put value entered. So let's go ahead, ta-da. So there you go. So that is pretty much how you do conditional prompts, which is pretty straightforward once you think about it, because if you are able to insert list expressions, then you're able to just do that do the conditional checking yourself. So custom formulas, yeah, you'll see what I mean. And then so we want to be able to put our own custom functions, and you probably have an idea how to do this already. So yes, we also know how to do this already. So before I continue, I'm going to say that I already have some formulas that I use, which are not part of this talk because they're just functions that calculate some stuff. So for example, they calculate the monthly mortgage, the monthly PMI, property tax, homeowners insurance, so a bunch of other stuff. I have these functions already, and they are a bit off, but for this example, they're doing everything. It's close enough, so don't worry too about it. But just example, you can have your own function that does something else, like calculate Airbnb rental or something like that. So you can do whatever you want, as long as you can call it be a list, you can call it in org mode in the table formulas. So let's exit out of there, and now that we know how to do everything, let me go back to the original table and go from there. So let me close all of these out, actually. And now let's go back and revisit this table, since we'll be much more familiar, except for one thing, and which I will explain. So we have the constants right there, and we have the house prices, and we have everything just like I mentioned before, but the main part that we want to look at is the table formula. So let's open up our special editing buffer, Control C, comma, and as you can see, I have some right here. So the fifth column, I'm saying, hey, I'm gonna call this function REI calculate down payment, and I'm gonna pass in the third column and fourth column, and I'm gonna pass in true. I believe this is just to normalize, so to be able to convert to the proper decimal place. So let's not worry too much about that. And then for the sixth column, we're going to say calculate the monthly mortgage. We're going to pass in the third column, the interest rate, which we've defined over here in the constants. The 30, I believe this is for 30 years, PMI, the property tax, and home insurance, and then the fourth column. And then everything is going to be accepted as numbers, and we're going to have two decimals at the end of the place. So what else? We're going to, over here, here's where we have our conditionals. We're saying, hey, if the seventh column is 0, press enter tenant. And over here as well, if the seventh column is 0, we're going to press enter column, enter tenant. And for this one, we're going to say, hey, we're going to normalize the price, and we are going to, I believe this is a 1% rule. So this could have been extracted into a function, but I just did the calculation right here. And this, I believe, is the ROI. So yeah, 12 months. So this is just calculating the cash flow. So this is a very rudimentary function or formula. Do not use this because there's way more to go into calculating the cash flow, and also it differs from person to person. Some people are more conservative, other people are way more liberal. So it just depends how you want to calculate it. And as you can see, we have the N flag for numeric number, and then we're saying we're formatting to one decimal place, and the double percent sign is just to input a percent sign as itself. Otherwise, org mode is going to think it's some type of formatter, which is not. So if you do, as I mentioned, if you've used the printf function in C or C++, then you probably know how to use it. Okay, so this is pretty much everything in a nutshell. So one thing that I do want to say is the last section, which is automatically updating, which is the part that blew my mind when I realized that org mode can do this. So how do we do it? Well, you've probably guessed just from looking at the first table that we have right now. We add a column at the beginning of the table with a percent. With the pound sign, or hashtag, as the younger kids call it. And then so this is what we do. We added a column at the beginning of the table, and we do pound sign. So this is what it's for. This lets org mode know that, hey, I want the values, the table formulas, to automatically run on each tab change. Now, I believe that you can make it so that it changes, so that it updates on every keystroke. I think that's too much. And then you can also make it so that only certain rows update or certain columns. So there's a plethora of things that you can do that you should definitely read up on the documentation, because you will probably make a way better talk, way more advanced talk than I on this one. So I'm looking forward for that. But this is essentially how you build a org mode table formula that will help you know if a property is correct. So let's go ahead, and as a final out to this demo, let's go ahead and enter a new column. So org mode automatically puts the pound sign, which is awesome. And let's just say Emacs house, and let's say it is 100K. So 100K, and as you can see, it's already trying to calculate the monthly mortgage, but we'll see about that. And then let's just put 10% down. So 10% of 100K should be 10,000. So 10,000, correct. And the monthly mortgage is that. And let's just say the tenant income is, as you can see right here, tenant income is, let's say 1,500. And is it passing the 1% rule? Yep. What's my ROI? 118%, which is kind of cool, actually. That's a nice deal. So yeah, so this is a rudimentary way of calculating deals in org mode. So I hope you found it interesting. And yeah, that is it.